While Zootopia 2016 focused on prejudice and discrimination between different social groups, Zootopia 2 appears to go one step further by directly questioning systems of power. Who holds power, how that power is maintained, and who ultimately pays the price for the illusion of social stability. What is particularly striking is that Disney does not choose a confrontational, radical, or overtly revolutionary approach. Instead, Zootopia 2 employs the concept of soft power structures, rules, institutions, social beliefs, and ingrained habits that have become so normalized that most characters perceive them as simply the way things are. It is precisely this normalization that makes such systems dangerous, because injustice can persist without the need for a clearly identifiable villain. Power no longer takes the form of an individual, but of a system. In the first film, audiences could easily identify the antagonist, Assistant Mayor Bellwether, a specific individual with clear motives and a concrete conspiracy. In contrast, Zootopia 2 shifts its focus. Power no longer resides in a single malicious character, but in the entire operational structure of the city. The police, government, laws, media, and even public opinion form a dense, interconnected network. Each component has a seemingly legitimate reason to exist, yet when combined, they create a system capable of suppressing vulnerable groups without resorting to direct violence. This is a form of power deeply familiar in modern society. No beatings, no explicit bans, only procedures, norms, and community safety. Zootopia 2 poses a disturbing question. If there is no obvious villain, then who is responsible for the injustices that continue to occur? The police, protectors of justice, or guardians of order? Judy Hopps stands at the center of this contradiction. In the first film, she represents the idealistic belief that hard work and personal morality are enough to change the system from within. In Zootopia 2, however, that belief begins to fracture. The police are not portrayed as inherently evil, but increasingly as instruments of maintaining order rather than pursuing justice. Here, order does not equate to fairness. It simply means avoiding disruption. Newly introduced groups, such as reptiles or communities living outside the city center, are labeled as potential risks. Their mere existence places them under suspicion. Through this portrayal, the film critiques a mindset common in modern societies. Security is prioritized over human rights. When power is granted to law enforcement without mechanisms for self-reflection or accountability, it becomes dangerously easy for them to serve collective fear rather than moral truth. Judy Hopps and the tragedy of those who believe in the system. One of the most profound aspects of Zootopia 2 is that it refuses to present Judy as a flawless hero. Instead, she gradually realizes that she herself is part of the very power structure she once trusted. Judy does not intentionally oppress anyone, yet her choices, following orders, adhering to procedures, accepting decisions made for the greater good, contribute to the perpetuation of injustice. This is the tragedy faced by many people in real-world societies, good individuals working within flawed systems. They are not evil, but they are not free enough to do what is truly right. Rather than condemning Judy, the film places her in a moral dilemma. If she resists the system, she risks losing her position and her voice. If she continues to comply, she betrays her original ideals. Through Judy, Zootopia 2 critiques power at a deeper level, showing that power does not only oppress from the outside, but also disciplines individuals from within. Nick Wilde, the outsider who is allowed to exist. If Judy represents those within the system, Nick Wilde represents those who were once excluded by it. Despite becoming a police officer, Nick continues to carry a sense of not truly belonging. Zootopia 2 subtly reveals that Nick's acceptance does not mean prejudice has disappeared. He is accepted only on the condition that he conforms to the norms set by those in power. This is a particularly refined form of control, not prohibition, not expulsion, but assimilation. Nick is allowed to exist, as long as he does not question too much or disrupt the established order. This message mirrors real-world realities. where many marginalized groups are integrated only within limits deemed safe by the dominant power holders. Media, a tool for amplifying power and collective fear. One of the sharpest layers of critique in Zootopia 2 lies in its portrayal of the media. Unlike many animated films that treat media as a neutral channel of information, Zootopia 2 positions it as a crucial component within the system of power. The media does not necessarily lie. More dangerously, it selects reality, deciding what deserves coverage and what should be forgotten. Minor incidents involving groups labeled as different are quickly exaggerated, edited, and repeatedly broadcast at high frequency. News reports continuously emphasize elements of threat, risk, and instability, even when the available data is insufficient to draw such conclusions. Through this process, the film illustrates how power operates in modern societies. Without issuing orders or enforcing repression, it merely needs to generate fear, and the masses will voluntarily support stricter measures of control. What is particularly noteworthy is that the media in Zootopia 2 is not explicitly manipulated by a single individual. Instead, it functions according to the logic of viewership, attention, and emotional reactions. This very mechanism turns the media into a natural ally of power, because fear is always easier to sell than complex truths. Fear is a form of soft power. Zootopia 2 reveals a disturbing truth. The most powerful form of control does not come from force, but from internalized fear. When society is constantly reminded that danger is lurking, people begin to regulate their own behavior. They accept increased surveillance, more inspections, and greater restrictions on freedom, not because they are coerced, but because they believe such measures are necessary. In the film, marginalized groups are not only monitored by the police, but also scrutinized by the suspicious gaze of the community. This represents a particularly effective form of power: society policing itself. Zootopia 2 criticizes this phenomenon by showing how the silence and compromise of the majority enable power to persist, without the need for overt violence. Government and the common good, a vague but powerful concept. Another key argument in the film is how the notion of the common good is deployed as a political tool. In Zootopia 2, many controversial decisions are justified by appeals to, quote, the safety of the city. Few dare to openly oppose such measures, as doing so risks being labeled irresponsible or a threat to social order. Zootopia 2 does not deny that societies require order. However, it raises a crucial question: who does that order serve? When order is constructed through the sacrifice of certain groups' rights, can it still be considered just? Through increasingly visible tensions, the film critiques how power uses moral language to conceal structural inequality. The passive complicity of the public. One of the most realistic aspects of Zootopia 2 is that it does not place blame solely on the government or the police. Ordinary citizens, peace-loving members of society, are also positioned as subjects of moral reflection. Most do not actively hate marginalized groups, but neither do they speak up in defense of them. They choose personal safety, silence, and the comfort of believing what is easiest to believe. The message here is unmistakable. Power cannot exist without the complicity of the majority. This complicity is not necessarily driven by malice. It often stems from exhaustion, fear of trouble, or a sense of helplessness. Zootopia 2 critiques this dynamic not by condemning individuals, but by revealing the long-term consequences of collective indifference. Zootopia 2, an animated film or a social warning? When viewed as a whole, Zootopia 2 is not merely a sequel to a successful story, but a clear step forward in intellectual depth. By using an animal world to explore profoundly human issues, fear, power, responsibility, and choice, the film delivers a subtle yet powerful critique of systems of authority. Zootopia 2 ultimately reminds us that a just society is not created solely by good leaders, but by citizens who dare to question, to doubt, and to speak out.